Is America heading down the path to socialism? And will Obama's policies lead to a redistribution of wealth under the banner of fairness? These are just some of the questions my next guest sought to answer in his new book, Shakedown Socialism. And he's joining us now from New York to talk about it. Oleg Atbashian, welcome to PJTV. Now, Oleg, before we get started, you actually have a little bit of experience with this. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and what compelled you to write Shakedown Socialism?
I was born in the Soviet Union in 1960, and I grew up as all Soviet children of my generation, believing in communism, in all the rosy ideas that when we grow up, it would be sort of like an extension of our childhood, that there will be no money, we would have no problems, somebody will always be taking care of us, and what's not to like there. And of course we also knew that all the foreign countries lived under the oppression of dark capitalist regimes, including America. Well, America was the worst, of course, and it was a very dark and scary place where people were afraid to walk outside in the streets, and it was ruled by some oligarchs who were all fat, cigar-smoking, top hat-wearing capitalist pigs. There were no other sources of information available, and so of course we believed that. But eventually, as I was growing up, I began to encounter limits to intellectual inquiry, and I began to question those ideas. And in my book, I reflect some of that discovery and my journey of moving away from believing in communism into believing in capitalism is something that I think is important to share with Americans, and it's one of the reasons I wrote the book.
Now, you underwent quite a conversion there, and when you came to America, what do you notice in this country, or can you point to some specific examples of what you think are signs that America is becoming more socialist?
Well, my first years here were pretty unremarkable. I was just trying to make a living and support a family, and so I didn't understand what was going on, especially considering that I lived in New York, which is a big liberal bubble, and I was, while in the Soviet Union, I engaged in politics and joined some dissident groups. When I came here to the United States, I was hoping to forget about politics and just live a normal life as a free man in a free country, where all citizens are appreciative of their constitutional rights and their freedoms. And I couldn't understand what was really going on because I was reading the New York Times and watching all the public channels on TV and listening to the NPR public radio. But then I was still noticing some troubling signs, but I still couldn't connect the dots. And only after 9/11, when all the liberal media went into a mode of blaming America for what happened, that's when I realized that there was really something wrong, and I began my research, and I found out that I was fooled again. First time in the Soviet Union by the Communist Party, this time I was fooled by the liberal media, and the so-called liberal media, I call them progressives, and that's what I don't like the most, when somebody's pulling wool over my eyes. And so I began writing again, this time in English. I wouldn't believe that I would be writing against socialist and communist ideology again in America. If somebody were to tell me that back in the USSR, but here I am doing exactly that. What signs? Well, the first sign that I noticed was that in the media, journalists were fond of counting other people's money. And that was troubling because I just came from a country where everybody was doing exactly that. Looking over other people's shoulders, into their pockets and wallets, and seeing how much a person is making if he's not making above the allotted average. But of course in the Soviet Union it was justified because the economy was all monopolized by the government, while in America it was the market that determined the salaries, and so that attitude seemed very foreign and un-American to me. Why would you look into somebody's pocket who's working in the private sector? I understand the public servants need to be scrutinized, but not the private sector.
You mentioned the public sector because you write a lot about the unions in your book. And as you know, in this last election, they played a major role donating records amount of money to the campaigns. Why do you think the unions are antithetical to a free market here?
The idea of the unions is similar to the actual idea of socialism and communism. The basic underpinning is the idea of redistribution of wealth and fairness. Fairness, of course, quote unquote. What differs, how unions differ from the communists is more in the scope of their reach, because they want to establish a little paradise on earth for their members only, while the communists want to do it for the entire world. But of course, that ideology is illusionary, both in case of the unions and in case of the socialist or communist ideologues. The way they organize the society is a big pyramid, which I described in the book, where the overpaid union members stand on top of that pyramid, and underneath is the underclass of lower paid non-unionized workers, but underneath them stand an even bigger foundation of lower paid third world countries, or labor force there who are paid much less money, and that pyramid is unsustainable. And eventually it collapses, like Margaret Thatcher once said, that the problem with socialism is that it eventually runs out of other people's money.
President Obama, he's passed this massive health control bill, financial reform. What is your view of his presidency thus far, and what kind of policies maybe has he pursued that have maybe alarm bells going off in your head?
I don't know where to begin to describe all those alarms. I've been writing about it since the very beginning of his presidency, including his foreign policies, where he's reliving, recycling old dogmas, old cliches, all the created in the Kremlin by the Soviet propaganda, the anti-American cliches that have infected the entire world, and now our own president is recycling them, and as if he's trying to go back in time to the Cold War and relive it, only this time with a different outcome. That's as far as his foreign policy is concerned. As far as his domestic policy, let me present what I call the People's Cube. For those who are not familiar with it, everybody knows what Rubik's Cube is, so this is a politically correct Rubik's Cube, where all sides are equal, and also all players who play this game are also equal, because nobody is too smart, nobody is too slow, everybody is equal. It guarantees equality of results no matter how you solve it. And it's also colorblind friendly. This actually is a representation of the idea of fairness and economic equality that is the foundation of the whole liberal, socialist, progressive ideology. And even when you look at current screenings at the airports, the TSA is treating all passengers as equal. And so the equal redistribution of security for all. It's also in the People's Cube.
It seems pretty dangerous there to, you mentioned the TSA screenings, it's a big controversy here. What are the dangers of having, this view that everyone is equal? What do you see that doing to America's stature here in the future?
What is doing to America right now is a long story. Let me finish with the TSA screening. A while ago, when we had random bag checks at New York subways, we made a parody about random dousing of houses by firefighters, random heart surgeries on patients at the hospitals, and also other random things that were happening to the people, random pickups by the police. Now that they're screening everybody equally, then perhaps they should also use the same idea in all those other areas, so the firefighters should douse every single house, and surgeons should perform operation on everybody, and for instance, prostate exam should be performed on all people equally, men, women, and children. Now, you were asking about what this idea of fairness and equality is doing to people. It is works as an optical illusion. The cover of my book shows one basic optical illusion where figures change their appearance because they're taken out of context and placed in a different linear perspective. It is a similar thing with ideas of socialism, where political figures or amounts of money are perceived as being different, of different magnitude, based on that grid, the perspective that people would place on them. And that's what the left likes to call the new paradigm that they impose on our reality.
Well, it'll be interesting to see here with 2 years left on his term, how that reality plays out with Obama's term. Well, Oleg, thank you so much for joining us today. That's all the time we have. We really appreciate having you here.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure talking to you.
And be sure to pick up a copy of Oleg's book, Shakedown Socialism. You can purchase it online by visiting shakedownsocialism.com. And you can also find Oleg's articles on pajamasmedia.com. And we want to know what you think. Is U.S. the next Russia? Let us know in the comments section below. For PJTV, I'm Alexis Garcia.